Derek Carmichael slammed the sliding door of their condo balcony, so hard the glass rattled in its track, and Hazel Obin Carmichael stood at the kitchen island with both hands flat on the countertop and didn't move. She was 5 months pregnant. Her lower back had ached since Tuesday. She had a freelance proposal due at midnight. None of that mattered to Derek right now. What mattered was the list of grievances he'd been composing in his head for. She was coming to understand a very long time. "You're not listening to me." He was pacing near the window, still in his work clothes, the gray blazer he'd bought when he thought he was going to close the Riverside deal. "I'm telling you that this isn't what I planned." "What isn't?" Hazel asked. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Any of it." He stopped pacing and looked at her. "This baby, the timing is wrong. My commission pipeline is dry, the market's shifting, and you're sitting here with your design projects like that's going to pay a mortgage." "My design projects," she said slowly, "brought in $22,000 last quarter. Playing around on your laptop is not a career, Hazel." She had heard variations of this for 3 years. She had learned not to argue it, because arguing meant he would escalate, and escalation meant she would spend the rest of the night smoothing things back into place. But tonight something in her had changed. Maybe it was the baby pressing against her ribs. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the particular quality of contempt in his voice when he said laptop. "What are you actually saying, Derek?" He ran a hand over his face. "I'm saying I can't do this. The baby, this apartment, all of it on my income while you chase something that isn't happening. I feel like I've been treading water for 2 years and you won't even acknowledge it. I'm 5 months pregnant. You want to have this conversation now. I want to have this conversation before I completely lose my mind." He walked to the bedroom. She heard the closet open. She didn't follow him. She stood at the island and listened to the sound of hangers being shoved aside, a duffel bag pulled from the top shelf. When he came back through the kitchen with the bag over one shoulder and his laptop under his arm, he didn't look at her. "Derek," she said it just once. He stopped at the front door. "Where are you going?" "Tara's offered me her spare room for a couple of weeks. I just need to clear my head." Hazel had heard the name Tara before. In passing, the way you hear a name in passing when someone is being careful with it. She understood then, not just what he was saying, everything he wasn't. "If you walk out that door," she said, "you're not walking back through it." He opened it anyway. The hallway light spilled in, yellowed and indifferent. He didn't look back. She stood at the island for a long time after the door clicked shut, long enough for the city sounds to come back. A streetcar grinding down on King, someone's dog barking 3 floors up. She put her hand on her stomach. The baby was still, just resting. "Okay," Hazel said quietly, to herself, to the baby, to whoever was listening, "okay." She packed a single bin of what mattered, her hard drive, her drawing tablet, her grandmother's ring, her laptop, and called her cousin. Ruth answered on the second ring. Ruth, who had a basement suite in Scarborough and no judgment and made good rice, said, "Come now." Hazel took a cab. She didn't let herself cry until they were past the DVP, until the neighborhood she'd lived in for 3 years had disappeared in the rear window and turned into something she used to know. She arrived with $340 in her account. A freelance retainer that paid $800 a month. And a baby who needed everything she hadn't figured out yet how to give. Ruth's basement was not a place people came to when things were going well. It had low ceilings, one small window that faced the neighbor's fence, and a fold-out couch that made a sound like a complaint every time you sat on it. Hazel set up her laptop on Ruth's kitchen table and got back to work the next morning. She took every project she could find, logo packages, pitch deck designs, social media assets for small businesses across the city. She finished proposals between midnight and 2 in the morning when the baby's movements made it hard to sleep anyway. She ate simply, she rationed, she did not call Derek. At 7 months along, she landed a contract with a small food company called Maple and Root, a Toronto startup making jarred preserves and granola, in a Leslieville kitchen with 4 employees and a dream. Their founder, a young Trinidadian-Canadian woman named Yvonne, had $3,000 to spend on a full rebrand, packaging, logo, color palette, brand voice, everything. It was not a large contract. Hazel quoted fairly, not cheaply, and Yvonne said yes without hesitating. Hazel worked on it, like it was the only thing in the world. The design she built was clean and warm and honest in a way that mass-produced food branding usually wasn't. She used a color system built around amber and deep green, a word mark in a custom-drawn serif, and a packaging layout that made the jars look like something you'd find in a friend's kitchen rather than a grocery chain. It was, she thought when she looked at the proofs at 2 in the morning, very good work. She didn't know yet how good. Ruth's upstairs neighbor, a Jamaican-Canadian woman in her 70s named Vera, had taken to leaving things at the bottom of the basement stairs without fanfare. A container of soup, a box of crackers, once a bag of clementines with a small note that said, "Eat these, they're good for her." Hazel had never mentioned the pregnancy to Vera directly. Vera had simply noticed the way older women do, quietly and with precision. The night Hazel finished the maple and root files, she sat at the kitchen table and said aloud to no one, "This is good work." It wasn't a boast. It was a checkpoint, the kind you make when you've been alone long enough that you have to narrate your own moments. Then she went to bed, and a week later her daughter arrived. St. Michael's Hospital, 3rd floor, 4:47 in the morning. No one with her except a labor and delivery nurse named Carol, who had warm hands and the manner of someone who had caught a lot of babies and knew how it went. Ruth had been there until midnight when her shift started. The baby came the way some things do. Not at the moment you've prepared for, but in the quiet hour before dawn when the world isn't paying attention. Hazel named her Lena Ruth Obin. She did not use Carmichael. She made that decision somewhere between hour 3 and hour 7 of labor, alone with the ceiling and the sound of the monitor, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. Whatever this girl was going to become, she was going to carry the name of someone who had stayed. 4 months after Lena was born, the world changed in a way Hazel hadn't accounted for. Maple and Root's rebrand launched in September. Within 6 weeks, a food journalist at the Globe found the packaging beautiful and asked Yvonne who designed it. Yvonne named Hazel Obin and Obin Studio without hesitation, though Obin Studio at that point was one woman and a baby sleeping in a bouncer 2 feet from the laptop. The journalist wrote a piece. Not a long one, 5 paragraphs in the print edition, a link online. But something about the story had a particular quality. A woman building a design firm out of a basement in Scarborough, a baby in a carrier, work that was genuinely excellent. It got shared. Then shared again. Then Canadian Business ran a longer piece. They called it the most unexpected rebrand of the year. They interviewed Hazel over video call while Lena napped on her chest. The photo they used, Hazel at the kitchen table, laptop open, baby asleep against her shoulder, amber winter light coming through the small basement window, was the kind of image people saved to their phones. 3 companies reached out within a week of publication. Then Northfield Foods Group, one of the largest packaged food conglomerates in the country, acquired Maple and Root. As part of their acquisition terms, Northfield wanted to retain the studio responsible for the brand's visual identity. They wanted a 3-year partnership. The number in the offer letter was $4.2 million. Hazel read it twice. Then she put Lena down in the bouncer, walked to Ruth's bathroom, ran cold water over her wrists, and stood there for 2 full minutes looking at herself in the mirror above the sink. At the woman who had been called a hobby, at the woman who had counted coins in a Scarborough kitchen at midnight, at the woman who had delivered her daughter alone at 4:47 in the morning, and named her after the people who showed up. Then she went back to the table and called her accountant. On a Sunday in late November, Derek Carmichael and Tara Weston were having brunch at a restaurant in Yorkville that Tara had chosen because she knew someone at the design firm that had done the interiors. He was picking at an Eggs Benedict he couldn't really afford. Tara had ordered champagne because it was almost noon, and she said that was when it became appropriate. The television mounted above the bar was tuned to BNN Bloomberg. Derek wasn't watching it. He was half listening to Tara describe a property she wanted to flip in Leslieville, wondering how she intended for that to work, given what he knew about her current exposure. Then he heard the anchor's voice change register, the slight lift that happens when a story is considered genuinely interesting. And in what industry insiders are calling one of the most significant creative partnerships to come out of Toronto this year, Obin Studio, founded just 14 months ago by graphic designer Hazel Obin, has signed a 3-year exclusive partnership with Northfield Foods Group, valued at $4.2 million. Obin Studio is perhaps best known for its transformative work on Maple and Root, a brand that many in the industry are now pointing to as a masterclass in authentic consumer packaging. Derek's fork didn't fall, he set it down, deliberately, because if he hadn't it would have. On the television there was a clip from a short segment, Hazel, standing in a downtown lobby, Lena in a structured carrier against her chest, shaking hands with the CEO of Northfield Foods. She was dressed simply dark trousers, a cream blouse. She looked nothing like the woman he had left standing at a kitchen island at 11 o'clock at night, with her hand flat on the counter. She looked, he thought, entirely like herself. Devin. Tara's hand landed on his arm. Her voice had a specific quality he recognized, the one she used when she was processing something quickly and recalculating. Is that your wife? My wife, he said carefully, yes. He couldn't say anything else. Tara picked up her champagne glass. He noticed she didn't say anything kind. He tried calling Hazel's old number from the restaurant bathroom. Disconnected. He tried the studio's website contact form that evening. No response. He found a mutual acquaintance who might have Ruth's number, was told politely but without ambiguity that Ruth was not going to pass messages along on his behalf. He had a lawyer draft a letter. He received a response from Hazel's lawyer instead. A single, precise paragraph stating that his client was not interested in reconciliation, and that any matters pertaining to parental arrangements could be discussed through the appropriate legal channels. She had a lawyer, of course she did. He sent flowers to an old address. They came back. He wrote a letter by hand, the way he used to think people did when they really meant things. He mailed it to her lawyer's address. He received a formal acknowledgement of receipt and nothing else. The wall she had built was not made of anger. It was made of something much harder to get past: indifference to the question of him. Tara Weston left in January. She sat him down on a Thursday evening, with the particular calm of someone who has already moved the important things to storage while you were at work. "You're still carrying her," Tara said. "Everything you're thinking about is her." "That's not true." Tara looked at him the way a property assessor looks at a foundation problem. "Your commission numbers are down 30%. You've been somewhere else since November. I can't build a future with someone who is still living inside a decision he already made." She paused. "Hugh Gallagher has asked me to consult on a development project in Vancouver. I'm going." He recognized the name, a developer. The kind Tara had always been more interested in than she'd let on. She left by the end of the week, taking her coffee machine, a set of dishes, and the particular fiction that things between them had ever been about more than convenience and proximity to ambition she could borrow for a while. The performance review at the firm followed in February. 3 missed targets, a formal improvement plan. His manager, who was professional and not unkind about it, told him the numbers didn't sustain a longer conversation. He was out by March. His car, an SUV he'd leased before the market softened, optimistic arithmetic that had never quite resolved, was repossessed from outside his apartment building on a Tuesday morning while he was making instant oatmeal. He watched from the window because there was no point going down. He recognized the logistics of it. He had watched it coming for 2 months and done nothing useful. He moved to a bachelor sublet in Etobicoke. He picked up delivery shifts. He took a temp labor posting through an agency, loading and moving commercial furniture for businesses relocating around the city. It was cash, it was quick to start, and it required a level of mental vacancy that he found, in a dark way, something close to restful. He thought about Hazel almost constantly. Not the way he used to, when thinking about her meant running the math of what she contributed or cost. Now he thought about the way she used to work, at the kitchen table, long after he'd gone to bed. Proofing her own proposals aloud, very quietly, as though the words needed to hear themselves before she sent them out into the world. He thought about the night he'd left and the sound of the door clicking shut and how it had felt. In the moment, like relief. He understood now exactly what he'd been relieved to leave behind. Not the debt, not the timing, not the apartment on King. Her capacity. The size of what she was actually doing, which he had been frightened of in a way he'd never admitted even to himself. He had looked at a pregnant woman building something extraordinary at a kitchen table and called it a hobby. He had looked at everything she was becoming and decided it was small because it was easier than deciding that he was. He never knew the addresses on work orders until the morning of the job. The agency sent the crew the location at 6 a.m. and you showed up. The building was on Bathurst, south of King. A commercial renovation, newly signed tenants moving in on the 8th floor. His crew loaded the service elevator and rode up in silence, the way crews do when the day is still early and nobody's had enough coffee yet. The floor was mostly empty. Pale hardwood, floor-to-ceiling windows facing south, the lake a flat gray line beyond the rooftops. The space smelled of fresh paint and the particular clean concrete smell of a room that is about to become something. Workers were installing a sign panel above the reception wall, white letters on a dark background, not yet finished. Obin Studio. He saw it before he saw her. He had a moment, one full moment, to understand what it meant. And then the flat-packed desk box he'd been carrying slipped from his grip and hit the hardwood floor with a crack that turned every head on the space. Hazel was standing near the windows, pointing at where a meeting table should be placed, Lena in a structured carrier against her chest. Lena, who was 11 months old and had apparently decided this was a good morning to be awake and observant, was looking at the world with the focused curiosity of someone who hasn't yet learned to pretend otherwise. A young woman with a clipboard stood beside Hazel, making notes. Hazel turned at the sound of the box. She looked at him the way you look at something you've already accounted for and put in its proper place. "It's all right," she said to the security guard near the elevator, who had started forward. "Give us a moment." She crossed the floor toward him, not fast, not with any particular drama. Lena adjusted in the carrier, small hands flexing open, then closed. Derek tried to find the words he'd rehearsed. They had been composed for a different version of this moment, a phone call, maybe, or a letter. Not here, with his work gloves still on and her name going up in letters on the wall behind her. "I know what I did," he said finally. "I know I don't have any right to be asking, but I'm asking anyway. I want to know her." He looked at Lena, at his daughter, who looked back at him with gray eyes that were, he realized for the first time, precisely his mother's. "And I want you to know that I understand now. Everything I said, everything I called unimportant. I was wrong about all of it." Hazel didn't speak for a moment. Around them, the work of the morning continued at a respectful distance. The installation team worked steadily at the reception wall. Someone drilled something at the far end of the floor. The city moved below the windows, indifferent and enormous and ongoing. "Her name is Lena Ruth Obin," Hazel said. Her voice was unhurried, level. "I chose Obin because I needed her to carry the name of someone who showed up. That's not a punishment for you, Derek. That's just what the name means now." He nodded. He didn't trust his voice. "You didn't leave because the timing was wrong," she continued. "You didn't leave because you were scared of fatherhood, or overwhelmed by the market, or financially stressed, even though you told yourself all of those things and probably still do." She let a brief pause sit between them. "You left because you had already decided I wasn't going anywhere. That this," she let her eyes move across the empty floor, the windows, the skyline, the letters being fixed to the wall, "wasn't real. That I was someone who sat at a kitchen table, making things that didn't matter. And that you could walk out the door without it meaning anything. Because I was never going to become something you'd have to reckon with." "Hazel, I'm not angry." She said it without softening it. "I want you to hear that clearly. I'm not standing here in my office with my daughter and a building full of my people telling you this because I want you to feel small. I'm telling you because I think you deserve an honest account of what actually happened between us. And I may not get another opportunity to give it to you." He felt the weight of it settle into him. The kitchen island, the door, the particular sound of a lock closing on something that was already done. "You can be in her life," Hazel said, "if you do the work, if you go through the right channels and you show up consistently, and you stop treating access to her like something you're owed after the fact. That's genuinely available to you, and I mean that. But it has nothing to do with us. There is no us to return to. That ended the night you decided I wasn't worth staying for." She looked at him steadily, not with contempt, not with sorrow. With the clear, settled gaze of someone who has been waiting for a conversation that is finally fully over. "I'm going to get back to my morning now." She turned back to her assistant, said something quiet about the meeting table placement, and moved toward the windows with Lena settled against her chest. Lena rested her head against her mother's collarbone and looked out at the view with complete contentment, as though she had taken one look at the city spread below her and decided it was satisfactory. The security guard stepped to Derek's elbow, gently, the way a door stands in the moment before it closes. Derek picked up the box he'd dropped. He set it against the wall with the others. He walked back to the elevator and pressed the button and waited. As the doors began to close, he had one last angle on the floor, Hazel crouching slightly to bring Lena's eye level up to the window, pointing at something in the distance. The lake, maybe, or the skyline, or simply the whole gray-bright fact of the city. Lena reached one arm toward it, opening and closing her small fist the way babies do when they want to hold something that isn't quite reachable yet. Hazel laughed softly at something the baby did. Just to herself, just because she felt like it. Not for anyone watching. The doors closed. Derek drove back to Etobicoke in the hatchback, with the cracked dashboard and the coffee cup in the holder that had been there since Tuesday. He parked outside his building and didn't get out. He sat in the car while the afternoon light changed over the city, while the streetcar made 2 passes on the street below, while a kid on a bike looped the same block 3 times the way kids do when a road is good for it and the afternoon is long. He thought about the word she'd used, reckon, something you'd have to reckon with. He had looked at Hazel Obin at a kitchen table, her laptop open, her proposals half finished, her conviction quiet and thorough and entirely real, and he had seen a ceiling instead of a floor. He had looked at everything she was building and decided it was small, because it was considerably easier than deciding that he was. He had walked away from the most capable person he had ever known, from a daughter with his mother's eyes, from a life that had been, underneath all the stories he'd told himself about what was wrong with it, genuinely good. Not because of the 4.2 million. Not because of the logo on the wall or the Bloomberg segment or the handshakes in a downtown lobby. Before any of that, In a basement in Scarborough at 2 in the morning, with a baby pressing against her ribs and a proposal due at midnight, and $340 in the bank, Hazel Obin had been exactly who she turned out to be. He had just never had the clarity or the courage to see it. He sat in the car until the sky went orange and then purple, and then the particular flat dark of a Toronto winter evening, and then he went inside and he didn't call anyone. There was nothing left to say that the day hadn't already said for him. More precisely and more finally than he ever could have managed himself.